According to legend, ancient Rome was founded by the two brothers and demigods, Romulus and Remus, on April 21, 753 BC. Legend states that in an argument over who would rule the city, or, in another version, where the city would be located, Romulus killed Remus and named the city after him. This story of the founding of Rome is the best known, but it is not the only one. Other legends claim that the city was named after a woman, Rome, who traveled with Aeneas and the other Trojan survivors after the city fell. Upon landing on the banks of the Tiber River, Roma and the other women objected when the men wanted to move on. She led the women in burning the Trojan ships and so effectively stranded the Trojan survivors at the site that would eventually become Rome. Aeneas of Troy is featured in this legend and also, famously, in Virgil's Aeneid, as the founder of Rome and ancestor of Romulus and Remus, thus linking Rome to the grandeur and power that once was Troy. Still other theories about the famous city's name suggest that it came from Rimmon, the ancient name of the river Tiber, and was simply a place name given to the small commercial center established on its banks, or that the name derived from an Etruscan word that might have designated one of their settlements. My name is Francisca, and welcome to the Myths and Curiosities channel. Originally a small city on the banks of the Tiber, Rome grew in size and strength from the start through trade. The city's location provided merchants with an easy-to-navigate waterway for the traffic of their wares. The city was ruled by 7 kings, from Romulus to Tarquinius, as it grew in size and power. Greek culture and civilization, which arrived in Rome via the Greek colonies to the south, provided the early Romans with a model on which to build their own culture. From the Greeks they borrowed literacy and religion, as well as the foundations of architecture. The Etruscans to the north provided a model of urban commerce and luxury. Etruria was also well situated for trade, and early Romans learned the skills of trade from the Etruscan example or were taught directly by the Etruscans, who made inroads into the area around Rome sometime between 650 and 600 BC. From the beginning, the Romans showed a talent for borrowing and improving the skills and concepts of other cultures. The Kingdom of Rome quickly grew from a trading city to a thriving city between the 8th and 6th centuries BC. When the last of Rome's 7 kings, Tarquinius the Proud, was deposed in 509 BC, his rival for power, Lucius Junius Brutus, reformed the system of government and established the Roman Republic. Although the city owed its prosperity to trade in the early years, it was Roman warfare that would make it a powerful force in the ancient world. Wars with the North African city of Carthage, known as the Punic Wars, 264 to 146 BC, consolidated Rome's power and helped the city grow in wealth and prestige. Rome and Carthage were rivals in trade in the western Mediterranean, and with Carthage defeated, Rome had almost absolute dominance over the region, although there were still pirate incursions that prevented complete Roman control of the sea. As the Republic of Rome grew in power and prestige, the city of Rome began to suffer from the effects of corruption, greed, and over-reliance on foreign slave labor. Gangs of unemployed Romans, unemployed by the influx of slaves brought in through territorial conquests, hired themselves out as bandits to carry out the orders of any wealthy senator who paid them. The city's wealthy elite, the patricians, became increasingly rich at the expense of the lower working class, the plebeians. In the 2nd century BC, the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, 2 Roman tribunes, led a movement for land reform and political reform in general. Although the brothers were killed for this cause, their efforts spurred legislative reforms and the rampant corruption of the Roman Senate was reduced, or, at the very least, the senators became more discreet in their corrupt activities. By the time of the First Triumvirate, both the city and the Republic of Rome were in full bloom. Even so, Rome found itself divided along class lines. The ruling class called themselves the optimates, the best men, while the lower classes, or those who sympathized with them, were known as the popular, the people. These names were simply applied to those who held a particular political ideology. They were not rigid political parties, nor were they all ruling class optimists or all popular classes. In general, the optimates held to traditional political and social values that favored the power of the Roman Senate and the prestige and superiority of the ruling class. The popular, again generally speaking, favored the reform and democratization of the Roman Republic. These opposing ideologies would notoriously clash in the form of three men who would unwittingly bring about the end of the Roman Republic. Marcus Licinius Crassus and his political rival, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, joined another, younger politician, Gaius Julius Caesar, to form what modern historians call the First Triumvirate of Rome, although the Romans of the time never had used that term, nor the three men who made up the Triumvirate. Crassus and Pompey maintained the ideal political line while Caesar was popular. The three men were equally ambitious and, vying for power, managed to keep each other in check while helping to make Rome prosper. Crassus was the richest man in Rome and was corrupt to the point of forcing wealthy citizens to pay him security money. If the citizen paid, Crassus would not burn that person's house, but if there was no money, the fire would be lit and Crassus would charge a fee to send men to put out the fire. Although the motive behind the origin of these fire brigades was far from noble, Crassus effectively created the first fire department that would later prove to be of great value to the city. Both Pompey and Caesar were great generals who, through their respective conquests, enriched Rome. Although he was the richest man in Rome, and, it is argued, the richest in all of Roman history, Crassus craved the same respect that people gave Pompey and Caesar for their military successes. In 53 BC, he led a considerable force against Parthia and was defeated at the Battle of Carrhae in present-day Turkey, where he was killed when truce negotiations failed. With Crassus' death, the First Triumvirate disintegrated and Pompey and Caesar declared war on each other. Pompey tried to eliminate his rival by legal means and had the Senate order Caesar to Rome to be tried on various charges. Instead of returning to the city humbly to face these accusations, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BC and entered Rome ahead of him. He refused to respond to the accusations and turned his focus to eliminating Pompey as a rival. Pompey and Caesar met in battle at Pharsalus, Greece, in 48 BC, where Caesar's numerically inferior force defeated Pompey's larger. Pompey himself fled to Egypt, hoping to find refuge there, but was murdered on his arrival. News of Caesar's great victory against overwhelming numbers at Pharsalus spread quickly, and many of Pompey's former friends and allies quickly sided with Caesar, believing he was favored by the gods.
Julius Caesar was now the most powerful man in Rome. He effectively ended the Republic period by having the Senate proclaim him dictator. His popularity among the people was enormous, and his efforts to create a strong and stable central government meant greater prosperity for the city of Rome. He was assassinated by a group of Roman senators in 44 BC, however, precisely because of these conquests. The conspirators, Brutus and Cassius among them, seemed to fear that Caesar was becoming too powerful and that he might eventually abolish the Senate. After his death, his right-hand man and cousin Mark Antony, joined forces with Caesar's nephew and heir Gaius Octavius Tyrannus, Octavian, and Caesar's friend Marcus Aemilius Lepidus to defeat the forces of Brutus and Cassius. In the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate of Rome, but, as with the first, these men were equally ambitious. Lepidus was effectively neutralized when Antony and Octavian agreed that he should have Hispania and Africa to rule over, and thus barred him from any power play in Rome. It was agreed that Octavian would rule the Roman lands in the west and Antony in the east. Antony's involvement with the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra VII, however, upset the balance that Octavian had hoped to maintain, and the two went to war. The combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra were defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, and both later took their own lives. Octavian emerged as the sole power in Rome. In 27 BC, he received extraordinary powers from the Senate and was named after Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Historians agree that this is the point where the history of Rome ends and the history of the Roman Empire begins. Tell me below if you liked it, and if you liked it, leave a like and share this video with your friends. This is very important for the channel, and it just takes a little time from you. See you in the next video.